Hi, welcome to Transborder Art Conversations with Artists. I'm Graciela Cassel, one of the directors of Transborder Art, and I'm very pleased to announce our 31st episode, Sculpting in Time. We are doing with a Zoom connection, and I want to present you to our guest artists, Elisa Gutierrez Eriksen, Kathy Halfin, Jasmine Murrell, and Victoria Catherine Chan. They have many interesting things to share, and stay tuned and enjoy it.
I started working at the gallery 100 metros cúbicos. That was my first curatorial experience. We were doing exhibitions with emergent artists mostly, and the thing that was interesting there is that besides representing these artists and doing exhibitions, we were accompanying them in the development of their work and in the, like putting it out there basically, but we would help them with open calls and things like that. So that was the first time that I started working closely with artists. It was at a time where I was like basically trying to make my own work as an artist, which at the end, as you can imagine, it kind of like deflected into the curatorial practice. I collaborated with many institutions in Mexico, the Centro Cultural España, Cultural Center of Spain, the Animasivo Festival, and the last thing that I did over there was collaborate with the UNESCO Field Office, where I was a culture specialist developing programs related to migration, sustainability, ecology, education, etc. And I think that in New York, my career as a curator has shifted a lot. I feel like before this, it was very informed by the institution that I was working with. And now it's like more focused on the things that I'm like more interested personally. Of course, even if it's, like still taking some of the things from that time. And I want to share with you a couple of projects that I've been working on. Both were supposed to be open in the previous months. Of course, they didn't. So now everything is pushed. One of them is Subversive Kin. This is an exhibition that hopefully will be presented in September in the Clemente Cultural Center in the Lower East Side. And in these exhibitions, I bring together the work of Christine Howard Sandoval, Beth Faleiros, Tatiana Arocha, and Karen Miranda Rivadeneira. So all of them work focusing on indigenous knowledge, on ancestry, on things related to migration. Oh, we have images. That's going to be a lot easier.
Okay.
So that I'm just going to go back really quickly. That was the work that I did at the gallery, working with the artists. So in this piece, Christine is going back to New Mexico, to the place where her mother grew up, and she develops this piece called Channel that talks about heritage and creates kind of like a reconstruction of the path of what a channel can be. It being like a channel itself, a channel of energy, a channel that can be like a ghostly presence kind of thing. So she's revisiting these things. She's creating video related to this. And then another one of the pieces in this exhibition from Beth Faleiros, The Eye of Earth, where she uses local soil to honor the city where her city in Brazil was founded. So she is basically bringing back that attention to a forgotten history and to the many layers of like amnesia of that particular site. What we're seeing right now is Magdalena Dukiewicz's. This is an exhibition that I curated a couple of months ago. That was the last exhibition, not the last, but one of the last exhibitions that I presented this year, where she basically used materials like glycerin, blood also, to kind of like stitch together her idea of a dream home. So she created this installation in Stanford Gallery. So I'm just gonna continue with common frequencies. So I was talking about Lorena Mal. Her work is based on the heartbeat of 88 different animal species. she is recreating a sound, like a sound score, putting together all these sounds and creating also a series of patterns that kind of delve into music scores, into a live performance, into intervened pieces. Also, she's gonna have like metronomes, kind of like marking the time of each different species. She's like positioning 5 different stages of time for those animals, let's say. And I guess that what interests me most about this piece and about the general subject of time related to all these pieces that I sort of very briefly talked about is to think about time. It's only to think about one portion of all the different vectors of time that exist in the world. So I think that's a really interesting thing for me. Probably see in one of the images from Jamila McKee when she basically she makes a performance, a durational performance for the whole cycle of the moon, which we were just talking about it before starting, which is funny. But so throughout 27 days, she used different tools to just like dug dirt from the ground and create a massive crater. So in this piece, she's basically questioning like the impact of that humans can have on the earth, and also thinking about this as a you know, like reframing catastrophe as a slow action. So I think that it's also interesting how in that sense time has a very you know, like poignant presence in different works of art. And probably that's already 4 minutes, so
Thank you. Thank you so much, Elisa.
My name is Jasmine Merle. I'm an interdisciplinary artist, working in different mediums, from a range from installation to painting to sculpture to photography, to activating sculptures to be wearable. The first piece I guess I'm going to talk about is the Immortal Uterus. This was an installation, a large scale installation that was inspired by the massive laboratory production of the first immortal cell. The mortal cells that were like stolen from this African American woman named Henrietta Lacks, because she had cancer cells in her cervix that basically multiplied, and during a time when the country was trying to create a cure for polio. So her cells have been used in this multi-million-dollar industry to support like the first vaccinations for polio and countless other medical breakthroughs. So the sculptures are these kind of installations where there's like this nameless, like black void, but it also has like different sounds, and depending on where it's been installed from different institutions or spaces or places around the world, it changes form, kind of like the same way cancer. I was really curious about the idea of something that could cure you or kill you, like these kind of extreme boundaries. So the material itself is like, it's made out of VHS film, who also has this kind of power of like, could be of propaganda, power of creating new narratives, or it could also, you know, completely expand the narrative. And so that's one of the pieces. And the other pieces are some examples of my tapestries and paintings that are kind of a combination of painting, printmaking, photography, and textile weavings. I don't really think about categories when I'm making my work. I just kind of have ideas. And so, you know, this particular tapestry um, that's made out of like the gold teeth. I was really curious about memory and kind of collective memory um, and how memory is kind of passed on, and also how like trauma is kind of passed on, and the possibility of being able to communicate between, you know, different time periods through memory. And so one of the things that are kind of ancient that is also repeated is gold teeth. And so in this particular tapestry, you'll see, um, you know, images of like gold teeth, and then in combination with some, you know, my grandmother's hands. So I guess this particular piece, I was really thinking about and curious about like what my ancestors think of today, like if they were alive today, to see, you know, the process of humanity and the evolution of human beings, and like, and that the piece was kind of like my response.
Hello, everybody. I'm really honored and excited to be part of this conversation today. I work on different kinds of disciplines, including films, performances, live performances. And here I'm showing the project that is a film performance for the camera that I made this December in Israel. In the film, my family and I are going together to the desert Arava in Israel, and we reflect on our experience of immigration. The experience itself took place in 1997, after my family and I immigrated because after the arrest of my father and after the fall of the Soviet Union. In the film, we come together to look at the past and reflect on the time that passed, on relatives that we left in Ukraine, on experience of adaptation and place in experiences that we've been through. In the work, the desert itself becomes like a metaphor of our migratory experience. The vastness of it, the silence, the vegetation suggest another time, the slower time in a desert that we experience. It envelops us with our hopes, with our anxieties, with our experience. And here my mom reads the letter that my father wrote me when he was in Israel and we still been in Ukraine. And in another part of the film that is called Planting the Teeth, my father and I are going to the desert together near the town that is called Eilat in Israel, the southern part. We go together and as a ritual we plant the teeth, the giant teeth that I created for the ritual. For me, teeth is a very important symbol. It is a symbol of adaptation, of survival. Teeth as a live bone and with root. It's something that is very understandable for us as immigrants to adapt to the soil, to adapt to the new environment. My father and I, we create the hole in the soil, and we plant the teeth, literally insert the teeth in the soil in desert Arava. And that's an important ritual that my father and I created together as a family, as something that we bond and belong together to this place now. In the other part of the film, my father also gives an interview and explains a little bit about his experience in Soviet Union as well, and talks about that more. My other work called Labor of Love, and Labor of Love has something to do with the film that I created, the new work. Labor of Love involves a very laborious interaction with clay. It's actually bringing the experience from inside out. Clay has a very strong experiential quality, like gravity, for example. So I apply clay on my body, on my face, and I expose the experiences that I've been through as an immigrant, the stereotyping, the experience of my struggles and memories that I carry inside. Another work that I'm showing here called Flossing Time. In this work, I performed the grieving ritual of my grandma that passed away 2 years ago. In this ritual, I go and I eat the grival meal called Ukrainian meal kutya, and I share it with my grandma. I also plant the teeth in the soil as a ritual of saying goodbye to her, of something like taking a part of our body and inserting it to the soil and letting it go. That's basically it.
Thank you, Katy.
Thank you so much.
So, Victoria.
I could show it. Oh, okay, yeah, sure, I could explain. I made a film several years ago in Italy in the industrial zone, where I was looking for an old factory that actually was built during the period of the Italian fascists after the First World War. And I was mostly interested in the relationship between the human and the place and the history, and trying to gather all the collective memories of a time. And for me, it's something very personal because it's very much connected to
chiara, ecco, concreta di come cambia il mondo.
I'm most interested in gathering a collective memory of a time of a humanity that is, for me, something very timeless, and that it's also at the same time personal, because this is something that I have known since a child, growing up in a working class environment, because my father was also a factory worker. And it's something that I see, that the landscape today that is constantly changing, especially a lot of like urban realities that are transforming quickly to post-industrial era. I actually created a wall that represents the actual detention building center. And I collaborated with my father, since I do not know how to write Chinese calligraphy, unfortunately, for the fact that I was born and raised in Montreal, in Canada. So I asked my dad to actually write the poetry out of a selection out of a book that I got from while visiting the actual Angel Island Immigration Detention Center, which today is a historical museum. So just to give you the information, the actual Angel Island Detention Center is sort of like the Ellis Island in New York, but it has harsher, strict rules for the admission of newcomers, especially those who comes from Asia, most specifically from China. And I decided to use a performance and also to make a installation work out of this. And I learned to carve. So I followed the actual strokes in which my father wrote on the piece of wall. In a way, it's to recreate a place and my own imaginary of a location where my ancestor has been through and has experienced. So I wanted to relive this experience by using a form of gesture and using repetition and exploring this idea of what is lost and how I could, in a way, reclaim this part of the history of my family. it's the idea of the abstraction of the wall through the light beams, that each light represents a voice. It's an invisible voice that is being commemorated once you touch something. So it's also the idea of touching something that you cannot touch.
Thank you. Very beautiful. Very
Yeah.
beautiful, Victoria. You always speak about the process of things, and you let us know all the process that is invisible. We are back again to open the mic to our audience. I believe they're very interested in making comments.
Yeah, I was reminded of a Greek mythology by the teeth that Kati puts into the soil. It's a very old trope. So there I see a connection that I can understand.
Interesting. Can you talk a little bit more? What kind of trope is that? I want to know. I don't know.
Okay, so there's a Greek myth of a group of people. They're Argonauts, and they have to have many adventures. And one of them is Jason. And one of his miracles is that I think he has dragon teeth in a pouch, and he throws them on the floor, and a lot of undead soldiers are rising up. You see this a lot of fantasy movies, fantasy video games, something like that. So you can find that, surely.
That's interesting. I read Argonauts, but I completely, it's not connected. That's so wonderful that you're making this connection. I appreciate that.
Yes.
Yeah. So people will remember when you have teeth in the ground, especially the large ones, you know, with your father, the big ones, they could be dragon teeth. Why not, you know? So there's a layer of meanings that you didn't even know exist, but...
Absolutely.
Something to Jasmine.
Sure.
You were saying that the piece that you have behind you is a sound piece. Can you tell us more about that?
Sure. It's only part of it. It's called Some Impossibility Without a Name. And I guess in particular, I took all of these. I'm originally from Detroit, and a lot of my work deals with kind of myth making in media. And the other installation was out of film, and just how this whole idea of myths that are kind of created from like commercial music and films, and how those ideologies affect us. So I was really wanted to do something about, because everyone thinks of Detroit as like of just Motown, but actually it had like the largest publishing of like jazz, and it was just so many different genres of techno, just experimental music that came out of. So I basically destroyed them, and I had like a really, maybe about 1,000 different albums that were created in Detroit. And then after they were destroyed, I recorded the sound of them. And so, yeah, so that was kind of like how it was initially was supposed to be played. So when you come closer to the work, is it comes out of, I was really inspired by like fungus, you know, and like the idea of something that could be out of just dead matter and things like that. So it was like a modern day, like you know, like living fungus in a way. So it keeps kind of growing and stuff, and you know, as I find more records.
Something to say. I was really fascinated about like the connection between four of us. I actually, it's really interesting how each individual artist is thinking about the soil and the site and the time in their different ways. And I think it's also very relevant today, because we are all thinking about the climate change and like referencing that as well, and we are doing it maybe like in our personal ways, but it's always on the back of our mind. I think it's always connected. We know what's going on, and I was really curious and amazed to hear about all the recordings of the minerals and the species that Elisa was talking about. I'm really thinking about them also as like alive beings as well. something that we just don't know, and if we allow ourselves, we maybe discover.
Absolutely. Yeah, I definitely think of them as live beings, you know, like as I was saying, it's just, we have different temporalities. That's all, you know, like I was reading the other day, someone that was saying that rocks are the oldest species, you know, like, or the ones, not the oldest, but the ones that lived the most. So, you know, like there's a lot that we don't know because it happens in a very different timeline, you know. It's just like when you see like plants, there's been a video in Facebook that people have been posting and reposting of someone that made a time lapse of their plants, and it's just the plants. Those things that we think that don't have life are alive, you know. It's just a different thing. Like we are all species, different species in this planet, and we're just like too eager to think we're the most important one, you know. I was reading this like amazing book of it's A Brief History of Physics. Carlo Rovelli is the author. And it's just like a teeny tiny book that kind of like goes through the 7 like major theories of physics. And then at the end, it makes a conclusion that I thought it was like really heartbreaking, but real. And he was like, well, at the end of the day, I think that this world was created without humans and it's going to end without humans, you know? And all the other things are going to continue. And if the other, you know, like Homo sapiens species didn't survive, why should we, you know? It's just kind of a timeline. And we're just like pressing to that timeline and to reach to that point, and we have no idea. And we think that we're eternal, but we're not. So I do think that all those things are living, and it just kind of like live in a different space and in a different vector of time.